Hi everyone, this is Professor Hai Nguyen, and I want to welcome you to my tutorial video for your first document-based question exam. Yes, we finally made it to that point. So if you are watching this video, we're halfway there, guys. We're halfway there in terms of this quarter. Yes, it is that quick, guys. So in this video, what I'm going to try to do is give you a quick recap of the history that you have learned so far in the textbook, and also what you have done so far in the modules, and how it relates to somewhat what you're going to be doing for the first DBQ exam. In this video, I'm not going to try to explain to you so much what the test format is. It's simply because I'm hoping that the sample DBQ assignment by now have somewhat give you a good understanding of what the format of the test is, right? You're answering a question, you get documents that you get to use, and ultimately you have to come up with somewhat a cohesive essay, right? So I'm hoping that the sample DBQ assignment has helped you understand the test format. And I also have resources down below if you are still confused in terms of how to analyze primary sources, right? And how to properly cite, how to properly quote and cite from the resources. Because again, guys, the document-based question exam, they're really not that much different from what you have been doing in the modules assignment. Okay, because in the modules assignment, that's what you've been doing. You've been analyzing primary sources, okay, writings, maps, pictures, documents, right, that were written from a first-hand eye account of the time period of history that we have been focusing on, okay? And then on top of that, you're answering a question, right? You're using the sources to answer the question that I posed in the module assignment. So it's really no different from what you have been doing in the module assignment. But the only difference is this, is that one, what you're going to be doing for the document-based question exam is that you're going to cover more than just a decade, okay? You're going to have to cover somewhat all of the history or all the time period that we have covered so far. So what is that? 1890s, right? We started off in the 1890s looking at somewhat the response from the progressives, from the populists and from the progressives, right? In terms of the problems of industrialization, right? Well, so we start in the 1890s. And in module number 1, I had you discuss or participate in a discussion on automation, because again, industrialization, you have automation, and as a result, workers were somewhat fearful of the rise of technology. And I don't think we're any different today, right? Automation is impacting all industries across the board. I know I am, because look at it, guys. I'm talking to you from my computer. It's only going to be a matter of time until somewhat Siri, right, gets a hold of all of this somewhat knowledge and just spits it back to you. And ultimately, down the road one day, you're just going to be learning history from YouTube videos that was created by Siri or one of those somewhat crash courses guys, if you will, right? But we're not there yet. You're still learning from me. I'm still a human being. I'm using technology, right, as a way to somewhat teach from a distance, if you will. My preference is still to teach you in person, but I'm making the point that we can already see that students and also the direction of education is moving online. So sorry for that digression, but module number 1, you looked at automation, okay? You try to think about the history and how it relates today. You also looked at women's suffrage. And I hope you somewhat really like that module, because again, to highlight the sacrifices and the contribution and also the challenges that women had to overcome in America just for them to get the right to vote. That it's not until 1920 that women finally get the right to vote. And that was only after they put their bodies on the line and ultimately made the sacrifices, if you will. Okay, so that was in module number 1. Module number 2, I had you somewhat look at American expansion overseas, okay? Because what we looked at is that by 1898, you have the beginning of the Spanish-American War, and the Spanish-American War is going to lead into another devastating war. That was the Philippines-American War. But also by 1898, you have America colonizing the island of Hawaii. And as a result, you have this expansion of America into the Caribbean, into the Pacific Ocean, into Asia. And also by 1917, America is involved in World War I. So ultimately, you have American expansion everywhere throughout the world. So that was in module number 2, looking at American foreign policies and American expansion around the world. And then in module number 3, I had you shift back to looking at America domestically, looking at the 1920s, but in module number 3, I believe, we looked at somewhat that cultural divide, right, between somewhat urban America and rural America, between somewhat a more secular America and also a religious America, and also America of white America and also Black America, right, with the rise of the Ku Klux Klan and also eugenics itself. So that was the point, was to draw the parallels with what's happening today, right? You can clearly see that today America's divided along partisanship, political lines, red states, blue states, what it means to be an American, white, Black, brown, yellow, what is it, right? And also this idea of immigrants as an invader, as somewhat a danger. So I hope you can see somewhat the parallels, and it was no difference, guys. In the 1920s, you have that division, you have that clash between somewhat a modern, diverse, secular, urban America, and also a traditional, conservative, rural, and also whiter America, if you will, right? That was in the 1920s, and some would say it's up until today, right? So that's in the 1920s. And then we ended it with module number 4. You looked at the Mexican repatriation program, right? The forced deportation of not only Mexican immigrants, right, but also their American-born children as well, as a response to the Great Depression. Okay, so that's what you have done so far in the class. We have covered American history from 1890s all the way up until around 1930s, all right? So that's a span of around 4 decades, 40 years, 4 modules, 1 through 4, chapter reading 20 through 24, okay? And here's where I wanna shift gears. I wanna start talking about your exam, what it's gonna be focused on, okay? So let me pull up the exam page here. So let me go over the criteria really quick, what the exam is going to be about. Okay, so your first exam is called the DBQ, Document-Based Question Exam. It is going to be worth, I believe, around 150 points. It is going to cover chapter 20 through 24, modules 1 through 4. And like I said, it's really no different from what you've been doing in the modules, but the only difference is that, number 1, you're not gonna know what question I'm gonna ask, but by the end of this video, you should be familiar or at least be aware of the themes and concept that I want you to focus on, okay? But you will have 2 weeks to prepare from the moment that this assignment is published to the moment where you have to get your essay due. You have 2-week window to prepare. But the only difference is that you don't know the question, and also a 2-hour time limit, okay? Unlike the module assignment where, you know, I just tell you by Sunday, submit your work, right? The only difference is that you don't know the question, and also once you start the quiz, the essay question will pop up, the clock will tick, you have 2 hours to type out an essay that is at least 1,000 words. That's around 4 to 5 pages, double space, okay? You will have to use at least 6 out of the 8 documents as part of your somewhat analysis, and also incorporate and use all of the key terms that is available here on this assignment page. So with that said, yes, I understand I'm asking you to do a lot. I understand. But this is why, guys, you need to set aside as much time as possible to prepare. This assignment is not designed for you to complete last minute, not the day of, not the day before, right? Or even 2 days before. This is going to require at least 2 weeks, right? I give you 2 weeks, but I would say it's going to take at least a week, okay? And it really depends on how proficient you are in terms of your reading and also in terms of your writing. Because in this essay, even though you only have 2 hours, I expect you to prepare ahead of time to understand what the documents are about, what the key terms are. And once the clock starts, your job is start to put the pieces together. And how you put the pieces together, your essay, it needs to be organized. Your standard essay written in college goes something like this: introduction with a thesis statement that summarizes, that lays out your argument of your essay, okay, at the end of your introduction. You got body paragraphs. In each body paragraph, they will have a topic sentence that highlights what the focus of the body paragraph is. It will also have multiple pieces of evidence that you are going to present. So that could include the documents, that could include the key terms. And also in the body paragraph, you need to provide an analysis as to why the evidence you have presented in this paragraph answers the question that is being asked. Okay? So you got introduction paragraph, thesis statement in it, body paragraph, topic sentence, evidence, development. We call it TED, right? TED, okay? And then last but not least, your conclusion paragraph, where you try to summarize what you have discussed in your essay in a nice couple of sentences, and then ultimately conclude. That's how it works, guys. That's a standard essay structure, okay? I know it's a tall task I'm asking you to do, but it is possible, guys. It is possible if you set aside the time, because very different from what the students that you read in the sample DBQ assignment, you get to have 2 weeks to prepare. You have this tutorial video to explain to you what the documents may be about, what the themes, what the focus of the question may be about, okay? And then on top of that, you can have your notes in front of you. You can have the textbook in front of you. I'm not stopping you, okay? Because there's no way I can monitor you anyway. So I'm not naive, okay? So you have all of those resources available. So I'm hoping you put in the time and the effort. So with that said, let's talk about what your exam is going to be focusing on. So in order for me to do that, I'm gonna have to share with you another screen here. All right. The theme that I decided for your first exam that we'll focus on is, I'm gonna use a little bit of a speech that George Bush said during his inauguration address in 2001, okay? In his speech, George Bush made a claim that America in the past, America is a story of a country. He says it's a story of a slaveholding society that became a servant of freedom. And here's the key passage, guys. He claims that America is a story of a power that went into the world to protect, but not possess, to defend, but not to conquer. It is the American story, okay? And he proceeds, he says, the grandest of these ideals is an unfolding American promise that everyone belongs, that everyone deserves a chance, and that no insignificant person was ever born. So he's making an argument that America has been a force of good, that America, when it went out to the rest of the world, it went out to the rest of the world to defend, not to conquer, right? To protect, not to possess or to colonize, okay? And he also makes a claim that in America, everybody deserves a chance, that everybody belongs, that there is no insignificant person ever born. That's the claim that he makes. So it sounds great. That's what he's supposed to say. He's an American president. So of course he has to say nice things about America because he's its leader. But the question is, does the history match? Okay? Because essentially, guys, historians, we are scientists, social scientists, but we are scientists. And like a scientist, our conclusion is evidence-based, meaning that it should be based on evidence, on actual history, on actual events that happened in the past. Now, this exam is not an indictment of George Bush. I want to make that clear, okay? I'm not asking you to write an essay on the Bush administration, even though maybe some of you liberals out there in the class are already somewhat giddy about this. No, right? This is not what the exam is about. This is not an indictment of George Bush, even though I do have to say George Bush made a remarkable comeback, though. I do have to make that point. right? You know you are popular because this guy, I thought he was dead at one point. And all of a sudden, here he is dancing on Ellen. But anyways, that's another story, guys. All right, let's get back to the exam. So I want to get back to somewhat your exam. Yeah, that's what I want you to think about. The claim that George Bush made, that America is a story of a power that went to the rest of the world to defend, not to conquer, right? To protect, not to possess, and that everybody in America belongs. To what extent is that true? If you take into consideration the history that you have covered in the class, from the 1890s, with the progressives, with the populists, American expansion into the Caribbean, into the Pacific, into World War I, okay? 1920s, the cultural divide, in the 1930s, okay? With the Great Depression, the New Deal, but also the Mexican repatriation program. How does it hold up? Is Bush's statement valid? To what extent? Right? I can't give you more than that, guys. But that's the theme of essay of your first exam. And you're going to have to use historical evidence to put George Bush's statement to the test. And I want to see, right, how balanced your analysis is, okay, and how comprehensive it is of the history that we have focused upon. And in order for you to do that, well, you're going to have to use the documents, okay? 6 out of the 8, guys. So let's talk about it. I want you to think of the documents as kind of like, look, this assignment is kind of like a jigsaw puzzle, okay? I know what the puzzle should look like. And what I'm hoping is that by giving you hints and clues, big pieces of the puzzle, small pieces of the puzzle, you will be able to put it all together to tell a somewhat cohesive story. And in order for you to tell the history of America, I told you since day number 1, I'm really big on looking at history from the lens of people, right? Social history, bottom down perspective. We want to look at history from the lens of the people that actually live at the time, but not just the policymakers, but actually people, workers, okay? Women, minorities, immigrants, okay? Movements. So the documents, I want you to think of it as big pieces, big topics that I'm asking you to focus, or people that I want you to somewhat take into consideration. So what do we have? Document number 1, okay? We have a pamphlet or a short passage of writing from the National Women's Party in 1917 as to why they were picketing. So you might want to think about what the National Women's Party represents. What were they fighting for? What was their strategy? Okay. And ultimately, why were they picking at the White House? Why the White House? Okay. But also, what challenges, what inequalities did these women, right, were trying to overcome? And if you look at the history of women during this time period, from the 1890s all the way up to the 1930s, can we say that Bush's statement is valid? That in America, everybody's treated equal? That everybody belongs? Well, what does belonging mean? Right? Does it mean just to live here? Does it mean to vote? Does it mean to have representation, rights? What does it mean? It's all of the above, guys. That's what it means. So you might want to think about the challenges that women had to overcome, the successes that they had, and how does that hold up to somewhat George Bush's statement? Right? So I'm asking you to look at women, the women's suffrage movement, but more in particular, the National Women's Party, okay? And ultimately, the 19th Amendment, okay? So that's something you might want to think about. Okay, document number 2. This was another passage of writing from the great W.E.B. Du Bois, the great African-American civil rights activist from somewhat the first half of the 20th century. And what he writes in here is a description of what tens of thousands of African-American soldiers were signing up for during World War I, the promises that were made to them, the sacrifices that they made, the contribution that they made to their country. But yet when they come home, he redescribes how America treated these Black veterans. So this is my way of letting you know, hey, you should focus on African Americans, what their life was like from the 1890s all the way up to 1930s. And based on their experience, do you think George Bush's statement holds weight? Is it valid to say that everybody belongs, that everybody was treated equally? You might want to think about document number 2 in terms of what W.E.B. Du Bois is describing what was happening to African-American veterans once they came home from World War I. Okay, so think about that. Document number 3. Document number 3, this was written by Emilio Aguinaldo. This was the great Filipino nationalist who was fighting for Filipino independence. And he's making an argument that his people deserve to be free. And he's writing this letter to a magazine that was widely read by the American public. And in this passage, he is trying to make an argument to convince the American people that the Filipinos deserve to be free. And he explains why. Okay. So this is document number 3 is to shift gears. I want you to think about American expansion, especially in the Philippines, especially in Asia, okay? And figure out if America's involvement and expansion into the Philippines, does that match somewhat the statement that Bush made, that America went out to the rest of the world to protect, not to possess, to defend, and not to conquer. Evidence, guys. So you might want to think about, so this is where you might want to go back to module number 2, okay? To think about the Philippines-American War and think about the other examples of American expansion as well. Hawaii, down in Cuba, right? Central America. You might want to think about it, guys, right? Does Bush's statement holds weight if we take into consideration American expansion into those territories, okay? Document number 4, this was a proclamation that Woodrow Wilson made in terms of why America needed to get involved in World War I. He's explaining to the American public why America needed to send troops and commit itself to World War I, right? And it's very simple, guys, right? You read this passage, he makes an argument why America needed to go to war. And you might want to think about America's objective during World War I, what did it accomplish during World War I, and how it relates to Bush's statement of America as a force of good, as a force of democracy, as a force of somewhat freedom. Okay, this is document number 4. Document number 5 is very simple. This is a political cartoon. It's called The Big Stick in the Caribbean Sea. This is a political cartoon, an illustration of expansion into the Caribbean during Theodore Roosevelt's time in office. We call it the Roosevelt Corollary. And in this document, what I would like you to do as part of your analysis is to think about American involvement in places like Cuba, right? The Dominican Republic, Panama, okay? And again, it's about Bush's statement, right? Do you think what America did in those areas, the Spanish-American War, right, Dominican Republic, Panama, under the Roosevelt Corollary, is that something that really matches what Bush's claims is? okay? And the danger to somewhat pictures, guys, here's the danger, okay? I don't need you to retype and re-describe what my eyes can see. So do not waste your time and tell and write things like this. Well, in document number 5, we can see it's a picture of Theodore Roosevelt with his feet wet in a water that spells out the Caribbean Sea. We also see that he's dragging ships along with him, and they're blowing out some smoke. And we can also see that there are birds in the sky. Don't waste your time. Because yes, I can see all of that. But since you are under time pressure, guys, it's better for you to just summarize what document number 5 is related to in terms of Theodore Roosevelt and his expansion into the Caribbeans, okay? And then attach it to what we see here in document number 5. So give me more of the context. Give me events and historical evidence that we cannot see from somewhat this document, okay? So guys, this is a warning. Do not waste your time to retype and re-describe what my eyes can see. A picture is worth 1,000 words, so let the picture speak for itself. But what I'm looking for you is, can you correlate this picture with actual historical content? So a proper analysis of document number 5 is to discuss the Spanish-American War, or to discuss somewhat American involvement in Cuba, Dominican Republic, and Panama, okay, and the Roosevelt Color. So that's a proper analysis, guys. Do not waste time and re-describe to me what my eyes can see, okay? Document number 6, once again, it's about Theodore Roosevelt. But this time, it's not about foreign expansion. This time, it's about his campaign for the presidency in 1912 as a progressive. So this is my way of letting you know, hey, you should analyze the progressive movement as a movement. What did they represent? What did they fight for? What were their ideals? Okay? And ultimately, if you read from this passage, Theodore Roosevelt makes it quite clear what the progressive agenda was about. So this is where you might want to think about, how does the progressive somewhat agenda relates to how Bush's claims holds up? Is America a force of democracy? Is America a place where everybody belongs? So document number 6 is about the progressive movement, guys, okay? All right, document number 7. Document number 7, and again, what your eyes can see. It's Uncle Sam, right? He's funneling immigrants down to 3%. So this was a reduction of immigration to America. In 1921, there will be another one in 1924. Now, the question you have to ask yourself is, why did America close the door to immigrants starting in the 1920s? The question is why, okay? And once you figure that out, why, right? This is where you might want to go to module number 3, right? Look at the Ku Klux Klan. Look at the arguments against immigration. And again, it's about Bush's statement. Do you think that holds up? This idea that everyone belongs. Well, based on this document, it doesn't seem like Uncle Sam wants everybody to come here. Okay, so you might want to think about the impact how those immigration somewhat reform had in terms of American somewhat immigration system and also American democracy as well. Okay, but also document number 7, do not limit yourself to just 1921. Think about that. Think about that somewhat idea that the immigrant is dangerous, that we need to keep them out. So America tried to close the door for people to come in, but I guess the bigger question you need to ask yourself is, what about the immigrants that are already here? Did America try to do anything about that? And the answer to that lies in module number 4, guys. Think about Mexican immigrants as well. How did this law, right? How did the law in 1921 apply to them, and how it did not apply to them? And ultimately, by the 1930s, because of somewhat the Great Depression, how did America try to deal with those folks as well? So document number 7 is a little bit tricky because it deals with the theme of anti-immigration. And the theme of anti-immigration is going to span across 2 decades, 1920s and also the 1930s, guys. So you can use document number 7 to talk about the Mexican repatriation program itself as well, because it's indirectly tied to Mexican repatriation, because 1921, when America closes the door to European immigration, well, it turns out America still needs labor. So as a result, Mexicans were encouraged to come to America. So you can make an argument that Mexican immigration is a result of this immigration somewhat restriction. But the sad reality is that by the 1930s, you have a contraction within somewhat the American economy. And as a result, America is going to try to push out somewhat the Mexicans in the 1930s. And that's where you have the Mexican repatriation program in the 1930s as well. And then the last document here, this is a map of the PWA, the Public Works Administration. This was a government agency that was in charge of putting American workers back to work and also rebuilding America's infrastructure. It was part of the New Deal, right, under Franklin Delano Roosevelt. So this is my way of letting you know you might want to take into consideration as part of your analysis in terms of what the New Deal represents and how it fits into somewhat Bush's claim that America was a force of good, that America is a place where everybody belongs. Right? So this is my way of letting you know, hey, you should take the New Deal as part of your consideration, as part of your analysis as well. Again, guys, if you need reference, okay, you can just Google it, all right? Or if not, I will provide to you the link in terms of George Bush's inaugural address in 2001. Here's the statement right here, right? And again, I can tell you right now, this is the theme that we're focusing on. So trust me, guys, when you see the test, when you see the question, you're not gonna be shocked at all. Because again, I hope that this video has done a good job in terms of explaining to you what the exam is about. So those are the 8 documents that you get to work with. 6 out of the 8 of them needs to be part of your exam. And if you fall below the 6 document quota, for every document below the 6 minimum, the 6 document quota that you do not use, 20 points will be deducted from your exam. Okay, so it's 150 points to your total exam. So for every document that you don't use below the 6 minimum, that's going to be a deduction of 20 points. So you want to make sure that you manage your time correctly, you do the preparation, and you want to make sure that you use documents, 6 of them, effectively as part of your analysis. And again, guys, what I recommend you do is that as part of your preparation, try to write out a somewhat summary, okay, of what the documents are, so that way you're not somewhat panicking and somewhat stressing during the exam. And also you get into a habit of summarizing things in your own words, okay? So that's what I would do, right? I would somewhat look at the documents and try to summarize it. But what I would also do is look at the key terms and figure out which key terms could go along with each document to help me tell a history of America in terms of a topic, in terms of a group of people, in terms of a movement. So that is something you might want to think about. So for example, document number 8, right? It's about the PWA, it's about the New Deal, it's about the 1930s, it's about the Great Depression. So what I would do is I would go into the key terms and I would try to find what key terms is relevant to that time period and how it relates to the document itself, because that way you can put the key terms and you can put the documents together to help you tell a comprehensive history of the time period, because that's what it's about, guys, right? I'm asking you to analyze the history of America from the 1890s to the 1930s, and the focus of the theme or the concept that we're focusing on is what George Bush claims what America is. All right? So you want to put his statement to the test, but by using the history that we have focused so far in the class. Okay, guys? So that's pretty much it, guys. That's pretty much wrap up for this video. I have explained to you the test format. I have explained to you what the documents may be about. I have explained to you somewhat the themes and the concept that we are going to be focusing on for the midterm. So with that said, now it is your job to start doing your preparation and be ready to go, right? And be ready to go. You have a 2-week window to work on it, guys. So you want to make sure you work on it, set aside as much time as possible, and make sure you get it done before the deadline. All right. But other than that, guys, I am available to help, to answer whatever question you may have, but you might want to send your question my way as soon as possible, because if you email me the night before the exam, don't expect an answer from me, right? Because remember, guys, I'm asking for at least a 48-hour window in order for me to respond. And especially if this test is on a Sunday, then you're not going to get a response from me until after Monday. So it's just a warning that you might want to get a jump on this. And if you have any question, you need to send them my way as quick as possible, because again, you don't want to be working on this last minute. All right, guys. But on that, guys, right, best of luck to you. Okay, make sure you set aside plenty of time to work on this. But if you have any question, feel free to reach out to me. All right, so you want to make sure you get it done, okay, before the deadline is due. All right, thanks, guys. Have a good one.